Hello, it's Greg. Listen, guys, we're back. We hope you're having a happy day wherever you're watching this content from. As always, we'd like to thank you for your continued support of Greg Grizzly and Guides in social media and writing efforts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Perhaps as you can tell from behind me, I have Zoom. I'm going to try to successfully upload this to YouTube later. If you're watching this, kudos to me. I must have done it well. If not, wow, it's sitting on my hard drive and nobody will ever see this. And that's unfortunate. Get a lot of questions recently from people on Craig Hoffman 11 on Twitter. We always appreciate that. And in some beta reading groups that we are actively a participant in. And people will have questions and people want to improve their drafts. And not that we have every answer, but we've been doing this a long time, write a lot, to be sure, market a lot, do a lot of things well, things that we're looking to improve. And we've been able over the years, especially the last couple, to actively engage and help young and even some seasoned writers improve their prose. So if you take something from this, that's great. Shares are always appreciated. If you don't, we hope at least you enjoyed the content to a fair degree, and we appreciate your time, energy, and effort as we too try to reach our dreams. Far away they are sometimes in writing success. Thank you. I read a lot of books, as I said, and people ask, what's the weakest point? And the weakest point is often the opening. And I saw an engager today said, I've written this opening again and again and again, and it just doesn't work. Well, perhaps the rest of the story doesn't work. And I tell people, go forward and go back, and go forward and go back. Does it connect A, B, C? That logical progression. If you're sometimes when you're writing and it goes A, B, C, D, it works. And if A, B, C isn't leading to D, start at D and go back. Probably C and B are weaker than the A. And the A perhaps often in many books that I read starting in the wrong spot. Whether they have a trope where somebody gets hit, somebody dies. I read that all the time in a number of genre, especially the young adult or romance. Oh, he's dead on the street. It does work and people do it. And there's not, tropes are not necessarily bad. Sometimes the fan base, which is something you have to consider, likes that stuff. So it's okay. He broke up with me. He was divorced on the street. He got hit by a bus early. But it's where you take that and the angle, hopefully new to some degree, that you take that with character development that really drives the story to stand out, especially when you're looking for a book deal. Let's be honest, many people who come to me are looking to improve their draft to the point where they can be traditionally published. And there's a lot of competition. Not going to lie, it's a competitive world. And sometimes people don't want to hear what you have to say. I was beta reading last week. I started in earnest on a nice young adult romance. It was okay. There were issues in writing. There were issues in mechanics. There were issues in grammar early, and I made comments in the Google Drive. And the person quickly wrote, said, thank you, but no thanks. I don't think our styles match. And I said nothing. I said, beyond, good luck to you. I wish you the best of luck. But apparently, my perspective of good writing and clear writing and logical progression was defeated by her idea of craptacular writing. And so it goes. But other people do take the time to listen to criticism. And that's a big point. You may not like what I say or other beta readers say or editors say, but you should at least listen. It's your name on the book at the end, and those are your decisions to make. But yeah, the weak opening starts with a lack of character interaction, especially in the first person point of view. It also, I've read a lot recently that where the first person narrative works, but then there's a first person inner monologue that's inconsistently, sometimes it's italicized, sometimes it's not. And I often mention, I said, is this the narrator? Is this the first person? Is this the first person? It's kind of redundant. They'll say, well, he thought he was going to find something. And then the next sentence is, he found it. Well, I said often to the beta readers who do that, you're just killing trees, virtual that they are in many cases these days. And so you got to be careful being redundant, because I've said often that it slows down pacing. So when I'm looking at a story, is the conflict clear early? Is there a setup of a main character and a B kind of problem, or a B character? And when that's done, generally, I know that I'm going to enjoy the read and it's going to go pretty well, if not great. The other part, I was talking to somebody the other day, is that especially when you write first person, I get a lot of that. Probably 85 to 90% of the beta reads that I've done in the last couple of months have been first person point of view. You run the risk of getting that character that just the main character is so strong and so developed that everybody else just kind of bounces off them, especially the secondary characters. And there's a lack of minor characters. And I was saying the one story was going to a bus station and a train station and a bus station and a car rental place. I don't know. It's nice because it sets the scenes. I guess you have to put them somewhere. But at the same time, there was no interaction with any staff. And I said, when you're ordering pizza, perhaps there's a moment to say, the pretty waitress, what do you want? You know? And they were like, wow, I never really thought about that, where those little minor characters add. Not only do they add depth to the prose, they add depth to the world building. And a lot of people struggle. They'll describe the character, the main character well, perhaps even the opening scene, but as the story goes, you see less of that. Or, my apologies, as you see the book going forward, what happens is you get a lot of blobs. I talk a lot about blobs of description, where it's going along, the characters are interacting, and now we're going to spend like 2 paragraphs. Well, the books behind him were stacked, and there were historical fiction, and there were yellow books and red books and purple books, and he was. And I said, that works in drops, not some tsunami of description, info drop, as some people like to call that. And it's the same thing when the plot kind of plods along and people realize perhaps that, or have discovered rather, that there are plot holes. You get some blob of info drop that tries to gloss over all of the stuff in the plot that doesn't work. And I read a pretty good story that was rounding into 78,000 words just before it finished at 82. And suddenly there were like long blobs of, well, this and this and this and this happened because of this and this and this. It was a mystery kind of thing. And it solved all the mystery, but I could have read the first page, jumped to that page, and jumped to the last page. That book is over in 3 pages. You know who did it, you know why they did it, and what happened after. And I'm not knocking anybody's book. Everybody has different styles. That's not what this kind of program is about today. But you've got to be careful in how you're presenting things in not only a logical fashion, but in one that paces well. So I tell the people, drop those things. That could have been foreshadowed in page 20, 40, 60, 80. And the progression and growth of the characters. I see a lot of main characters who grow, secondary characters and villains in some stuff recently that are just not equal. And when the main character is clearly going to win, you've taken a lot of the narrative energy out of that. So I guess there's a big tip there. When you're writing the main character, take great care to the enemies. And there was a story I was reading. It was a science fiction young adult. And the monster came, and the main character, just meeting, easily defeats them in a paragraph. And I knew nothing about the monster. And I said, jumped in, jumped out, and said nothing. It just wasn't a really equal fight that interested me. And later, they had spent book time developing characters that flipped, and that's common, right? You're going to have the twist, and it works, a narrative device like that. But everybody flipped against the main character. And it was just, I said, it just dropped out of the sky in kitchen sink. And sometimes that works, but in that particular story, I had read 70,000 pages about these characters coming together, and they all split apart. And really, the main character could have solved the conflict on their own without ever engaging any of those people. It was really odd. So you got to be careful of that. The other part of that, I'll say, in weakness is just in style. People don't take the time to edit even through spell check or something like Grammarly. And you'd say, well, you're just being persnickety and uppity when you're like picking on it. And somebody had used semicolons, right? And semicolons in the draft were okay, but there were like 155 of them. And I said, that's an inordinate amount of semicolons. She's like, well, I said, a period works just fine. And some of the semicolons were just misused, separating dependent clauses, which generally that doesn't happen. The other part that people tended to do recently, an average prose with like a big SAT kind of word popped in, like that's a college admissions test in the United States, very popular, ACT too. And it just didn't fit the surrounding prose, I often say. it sticks out and you don't really want that. And the other part is I said, the likely reader of that book is not a super great reader. So when you have to sit with the dictionary next to a book, it's less engaging. Readability really matters. I've seen that a lot where the writer clearly wants to show, hey, I have a big vocabulary. Hey, I can use complex constructions. Hey, I can do insert whatever that shows I'm a good writer. And I say it often that you should just be extraordinary at the ordinary. And I'm often crossing it out. I said, keep it simple. I've seen a lot of writers use like 60, 70 word sentences. And have you ever seen that? Have you ever said something? Try to speak 60 words in a row without stopping. It's difficult. So part of pace is precision in the word selection, word variety. And when I talk about word variety, I see a lot of this, I read a lot of this. He nodded, she nodded, we nodded together deeply. Shrugged, shrugged deeply, shrugged a little, shrugged forward. I still shrugged to one side. I try these things when I read them. I'm like, can't I say, do people really do that? They become like a puppet, a marionette, and it's just not natural. So I go through, and there was a draft about 2 weeks ago, and I highlighted, I went through Google, you can see how many times the word appears, like, and it nod appeared in a 75,000 word draft about 350 times. That's a lot, man. And when every character does it, there's no uniqueness to the character. And I'm not saying you can't use nod, but I also got that same writer said nothing, and they said nothing. You're the writer. They should say something most often. When they say nothing, you've told me nothing. You've just wasted a line. And they said nothing. And they said nothing. Or they did nothing. I didn't quite get that over and over again. It just felt again like killing trees, virtual though they are. So I wasn't a big fan. I'm not a big fan of that. I think stick to what happens. And sometimes the better stories that people talk about are off the page. And I say, that's a story I would have liked to read. And it didn't really come out. You got to be careful of that. Be careful that your better story is not told off the page than what you're putting on the page. And that happens a lot to a lot of the new writers. There's a great backstory, and they're like, well, this happened once. I'm like, that's a really good backstory that I'd like to investigate. I'd like to know more about. And clearly the writer thought the on the page thing was more interesting, but in no universe was it. And I was like, wow. The other part of that, and I talked about the repetitive gestures, are the word variety. And everybody does it. There are those crutch words, those words that we use over and over again. And the filler words, like just, somebody was saying, I use just like 500 times. You probably do. A lot of people do. I go through every time I write, look for just, I delete it when it's possible, man. I hate that word. And I hate adverbs, as you know. That's not for everybody. I'm not throwing adverbs under a bus. They have a place. I use them on occasion. But I really try, again, to encourage people to search out for stronger adjectives. Don't be the kind of writer that settles for a so-so adjective with a slapped on adverb, unless it truly fits them. And I'm not saying that it's not, these things I talk about are not vacuums. People go against the rules and have been very, very successful. You look at Harry Potter, a lot of this, he said, curiously, it works. He sold billions of dollars worth of merchandise and books, man. Don't knock it. But is that going to work for you? I don't know. Are you her? I don't know. Maybe you don't want to be her these days, I suppose. But yeah, be careful in the word variety. Be careful in the crutches of those words that you use over and over again. And I was talking also, especially in the first, I guess a lot of the focus today of this first cast is on that first person point of view, where everybody sounds like, the main character sounds like the author. There's a good hint just for that. And the secondary characters sound like the main characters. They've all kind of spoken and moved and done the same things, where narrative has tried to be pushed into character interaction, which is still just quasi, that's a little joke here as we have the state of emergency in Japan, narrative. And it doesn't provide a lot of uniqueness to those characters. And when that happens, it's a book report. I talk a lot when I criticize or critique, rather. I try not to criticize deeply. But when I do that, I talk a lot. This is a book report, not creative writing. even from people who are English teachers who have a high command of the English language, they've really missed the creative element of storytelling when they do that. And I said, that could be a dialect, that could be an element of, I don't know, speaking more like the gender. If it's a man, don't sound like a woman. If you're a woman, don't sound like a man. If you're older and younger, there was a young kid that answered, well, I'd be happy to assist you, my young friend. A kid like 4 years old in the book. What 4-year-old ever talk like that? I'm around little kids all day. Ain't no kid that polite, man. And ain'ts and ats. And I'm not saying you got to overdo it. You can overdo it with dialogue. And the other thing is that goes along with that are the text tricks, like the apostrophes and the ellipses, the dot, dot, dots, and the em dashes, not a hyphen, which is often misused. Those text tricks and italics work to a point, but they don't really serve. I often say to the people, this is just weak dialogue being wrapped up. It's still a crappy Christmas gift if it's in a nice wrapping paper with a bow. You're like, wow, that's wrapped nice, and it's still a piece of crap on the inside. Be careful of that. The dialogue first should be strong. If you've made a really strong dialogue and those kind of text elements can add to that, you got it. And the same thing I was talking before a little earlier in this talk, as I finish up with about 5 minutes to go, talking about where the inner monologue kind of just gets in the way, and that smoothness where the story just has to keep going and keep growing organically. And sometimes those people, they work so hard, they have this great idea, and it's just a fake feeling, manufactured drama, manufactured conflict, ex machina solutions to those writing problems. And I get it, and it happens, and it works to a degree. But for many less experienced writers, or writers who are writing in some new genre for the first time, it really hurts the book, right? So I pointed out everything in the first maybe 15 minutes of this where you can go wrong. But I also want to close this with a message of you have to be confident in what you do. And I say that all the time on Twitter and things, like what people ask, like these questions, like what kind of writer are you? Do you worry about writer's block? Never have that. There's no writer's block for me, because I'm always thinking if that story has died on, or DOA on me, I move to something else and I'll come back to it. I didn't give up. I'm just moving on to stay productive. So stay productive. If it's not a novel that's working, write a novella. If it's not a novella, write a short story. If it's not a short story, write an essay. And if it's not an essay, do something else completely. Write a tweet. Don't let your creativity be stifled to the point where you are not doing something. And I talk about where I've written every day, literally for the last 16 years without fail. I've written something, a tweet, Facebook post, blog post. I've talked about more than 2,000 blog posts, lots of short stories, lots of books, lots of stuff on Medium that you can check out. Write. Because that builds confidence. There are 7+ billion people on the earth, and it's easier than ever to get your stuff out there into the hands of the populace. Big word alert. And when you do that, somebody is going to like you, and there will be people that hate you. I went to a author who I had kind of engaged a bit. She had put out a book. She had 5-star reviews. This is the best book ever. People, I love it. It's wonderful, highly recommended. And she had several 1-star reviews. This is total crap. I can't believe I wasted my time on it. I'm so glad it was only like 99 cents. And I've had reviews like that. People love me, people hate me. And I had trolls here, even among the folks in Japan, who said I was god awful. It happens. But it affected my confidence in my abilities zero, because you have to believe in you when nobody else does. And if I can leave you with one point today, is that no matter what a beta reader, an editor, a reader once you put the book out, a reviewer, a critic, your mom, your dad, your brothers, sisters, or even your dog thinks about your writing, if you focus on the work, if you grind away and you make a maximum effort to reach whatever potential you have as a writer and whatever potential that your work has in that particular prose or genre or length, you are a success. That's it, and have a great, great day.